Also comment on the points about the India case study, and particularly pick up the point, perhaps the broader point around the financing models and the sort of detail of how some of these more innovative financing models can work for a range of different communities.
Well, the case of Thailand, we use the government fund. We could use the government budget, and we sort of make it into the revolving fund, providing the loans to the community cooperatives, and let the cooperatives manage the development together, giving something like 2 or 3% margin. Like you give the loan at 3% interest, and you allow the community organization to add 2 or 3%, so the member repay at around 6%, 5 to 6%. So the community can have some margin to be a buffer between the two systems, because sometimes some members are not able to pay properly, so they have this small margin to take care of that. This margin, in concrete terms, it could take care of around 5 to 10 community members who cannot repay properly. So in this way, this wholesale loan that go to the community could repay to the organization fully, 100%, while the organization deal with different members who may not be able to repay at the same time. So the margin of this loan come from this government budget, and we design this government budget in such a way that the fund will be as friendly as possible to the way in which community could work. So this come from the government. In the project that I've been working in Asia, we received the budget from the Bill and Melinda Gates, the Gates Foundation, total around $10 million. So we use this money, the budget, to be a support, financial support for the group in different countries to build their own community saving, community fund, city fund, and sometimes national fund. So the money transfer to them, and they're able to facilitate the change in different city through the citywide upgrading, community mapping, community saving, and then the money is good to give the first loan to the first housing project and repay to the fund at the city level and so on. So this is a grant from donor passing to a different city system, different city process. We were trying very hard to get the other government funding in this different country in Asia to link with the people funding. There have been some cities in Nepal where the city contributes some money, adding the amount into this city fund so they could give more loans and so on. But it's really very hard to link this community fund with the private bank. Because whenever you link with the private bank will always make a very tough condition, like the money have to go to individual borrower. In our case, we feel it is more important that the loan go to the community, a wholesale loan to the community. So you allow the poor people to work together as a group. In this way, they can get the poorer family into an active process together. They help each other. So you have to use the social wealth that already exists in the community to compensate with the economic lacking. They don't have enough money, so they have to work together to fill that gap. So this is something which is working.
Thank you. Really, really interesting. I'm slightly worried that we've lost Susan and Eugenie. So while we try to get them back, let me ask you, David, particularly, I think that the questions that we haven't looked at in detail yet are firstly the question about civic space and the extent to which this kind of story about the closing of civic space in a number of countries is is an issue for the groups that you work with, and the likely long-term effects on the kinds of trajectories of development that we're all hoping to see. And then I wonder if we can broaden out this question about the kind of the extent to which some of the success stories that we're seeing are kind of, as you characterised it, a sort of middle-class driven model of development, the extent to which that's something that we're seeing more broadly in some of the issues that raises.
Closing civil space. Well, what are the characteristics of the networks of community organisations that Sumsug works with and the federations that I mentioned? And very non-confrontational. You know, these are all groups that have been campaigning and organising marches and disruptions for 30 to 40 years, and it just wasn't working. And so the choice was made to, instead of demanding from local government what it probably couldn't provide, you offer local government your capacities and your knowledge. And local government then comes to see you as a resource through which to work and with which to work. And that opens civic space. Now, that's maybe very particular to the countries that I know and I work in, but that's 35 or 36 countries. So the federations and the networks of the urban poor are actually opening space for civil society and civil society engagement in a very positive way. We just hope that the other 160 countries can be similarly infected. The trouble with talking about India is that I could convince you that local governments are innovative and accountable by picking some examples, or very top-down and successful at reducing poverty by some others, and absolutely disastrous creating poverty in others. I think it's one of the difficulties of working in India. What I do know is that the National Slum Dwellers Federation and Mahila Milan, which is a savings group of women, have found very supportive local governments to work with them at scale. Now, that is very much the exception at the moment, but it's growing. I was in Mumbai 6 months ago. There's an enormous community toilet program in the informal settlements in Mumbai, designed, built and managed by the savings groups of the slum dwellers, the pavement dwellers there. And it was always difficult to get local government support, but suddenly they get a civil servant who sees the power of this process, serving 1 million low-income dwellers, and puts in process a structure within local government, right down to ward level, to support it and fund it and maintain it. And so we do have these examples of amazingly innovative change with local government working with grassroots organisations. I just hope that also infects the 5,123 urban centres in India. Mind you, that number was a guess. That wasn't, don't quote me on that.
Oh, I was about to be really impressed there. Right, we've got time for one more round of questions. I've seen a few. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's start at that end of the room for a change.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'm Amina Khan, a research officer at the Growth, Poverty and Equality Program at ODI. Something that catch my imagination for a very long time today was that a lot of the literature talks about cities as engines of growth, and the World Bank has led that discussion for a long time. And to think now about cities working for people, and that in itself is a huge change in terms of framing the discussion. I wonder, how is it within the narrative of rights to the city, what are the things that slum dwellers can do to dispel the predatory tactics that businesses, the private sector, or even governments do to, whether it's the right to eminent domain that they use, etc., to deprive people consistently and systematically for years against a life with dignity that they have a right to.
Thank you, Amina. Let me turn over to Kate here.
Hello, Kate Bird, ODI. I've got a couple of linked points which actually link in with the last question from the last round of questions. During the panel and in the case studies, there's been a strong theme of participation coming up. And I just wanted to flag that although I'm very supportive of that, there's a challenge there for how to best include the poorest and commonly excluded groups. So a question really is how to accommodate social differentiation and heterogeneity. And for me, that's particularly important in African cities, where you'll often have different ethno-linguistic groups, as well as obvious gender differences and differences in terms of religion. Because participation isn't a mild, bland thing. It involves negotiation and can involve conflict. So how to integrate the excluded, how to use a systems approach to link cities with the rest of the country and to spatial poverty traps, to global value chains, so that the city isn't just seen as an enclave in itself, but linked both nationally and globally. And that means that we have to consider both a national agenda and also the private sector. What's the role of the state in facilitating that? So a nest of questions, really.
Thank you very much. And just coming over to the front row here.
Hi, I'm Lai Zhang from Development Planning Unit at UCL, University College London. I just want to reflect on something that Aloma Lavi said in his keynote speech. The point is that the word productive has somehow got lost. I would like to hear from the organizer and the panelist about the reasons behind this, why we have lost it. Is this our deliberate decision collectively to lose it? Or do we think that there has been enough on the productive side about cities? Or we think that this is something a lost cause. We should not engage ourselves with a question about that. So, well, the background is that I teach the city economy. So I'm really struck by the fact that in our collective imagination about the urban future, we have decided that this is an irrelevant issue. So I would really like to hear from my colleagues about this.
Not sure I entirely agree with the premise of the question, but that's the point. Caroline.
Hi, it's Caroline Moser, University of Manchester. Claire commented that she'd never been in a meeting where there was so much consensus about the community. And I think I just want to make a comment, which is to say that I think we'd be very careful not to romanticize the community and not to talk about it in homogeneous terms. Actually, we've already been getting more questions from that level. Yeah. And I think there are 3 or 4 really important issues. First of all, I think Samsuk is unique, and the Bangkok experience is unique, and we honor it, and it's a really good model. But I think let's think about 3 or 4 issues that relate to it. One is time. This lengthy experience, David was also talking about SDR, the enormously lengthy experience in a world where things are going to become so much faster, and the role of communities there. Secondly, extraordinary leaders, right? And we know that leaders are absolutely critical, and their role is critical. Thirdly, and I love this, because we're not in a meeting about gender, that nobody mentioned, or in passing, the sort of women have been thrown off. But actually, if you look at community organizations in many contexts, it's the role of women that are critically important in them. And fourthly, that there is a lot of internal conflict. Communities are not homogeneous. So I think in a way, Samsuk's miracle, it requires an explanation about how they've dealt with all of these issues. And maybe it's context specifically, and you can't do it in an African city or in another city. Maybe it's the government, I don't know. But this idea that the community is the community is this homogeneous entity, I think we need to de-romanticize.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that is a point very well taken, and as you say, reflected in fact, I think most of the questions that we've heard. Samsuk, let me turn back to you then to start to try to, I mean, I think this really the heart of it, this question about sort of differentiation with and different interests within communities. It would be fascinating to hear a little bit more about how you've experienced and tackled that in the context of Bangkok and Thailand. And then I think this question about the articulation with the national national policy making and national level sort of national systems, and then this question about productivity. Where does productivity and jobs fit into this, and sort of articulate, or how does economic policy articulate to some of these other more sort of social level policies that we've been hearing about this morning? So if you can do that, and anything else you would like to say very briefly to sum up, please go ahead.
Well, I think the first point is that the key issue is, if we look at the city or the development process in which we focus on people, yeah, if we try to look for the way in which the new way of city development would have the people as the focus. How do we understand the people system, the relationship of people, the social relation between the different people group, how to strengthen the people to the different development process into a new interesting system? Because today in our city, development has been led by economics and physical. You have a lot of infrastructure development here and there, and people are not the target, the main target for that development. So if we have to refocus to look at the people, then we would have to develop a lot of understanding, a lot of design, how the people system will be strengthened and will be a very proactive development process of a new way of how the city would be managed. It's the same thing with the slum upgrading or housing development. If we look at people as the focus, we look at change, we look at upgrading in the people themselves, in the people system, in the people way of doing things, in the people interaction, in the people kind of negotiation power, relationship with the other, and so on. And through the housing development process, how we create the space and the system to allow the people to be stronger in that manner. It's the different way from looking at housing development as number of units, how you can pay, how you can afford, and people live individually. The focus is not very much the people, but more the economic generation or more system-like kind of thing. So I think if we change it this way, poor people, different groups of people, or the poor and the rich, can always be integrated. We can build a community where the different kinds of people can find a common platform, where we can have a small group. You have a small space, you have a larger space, you have the intermediate space, and you have the interlink between the other. And that will be a very, very exciting way of thinking. And I think there is a very important institution like ODI and many friends who sit in this room should be able to contribute to this change, because we have been led by economic and physical change for so long, and human being never become the target of change. So if we come back, we able to strengthen people, we have people as target of change, we understand more the community process of the modern society, we understand more the design, how the strength of the people could be the key actor to make things change, to make the physical thing look better with a much lower price. We look into the strength of the people, how to make environment condition better, and physical environment also become better. I think people, human beings, are the change factor of all. And we very much ignore this factor for such a long time. We look at people as beneficiaries or passive recipients for things and so on, and planner or development designer become like God to look at things, how you should live, how you should behave, and so on. Now, if we just look at people as the focus of the key issue, the target of making change, and they get stronger, we can, of course, generate new kinds of community in the city. But I think today it's stuck. The knowledge of what community is very much from the past, and it's not so much a new way of thinking along this way. And I would say, in my experience working with the citywide upgrading, that once we look at people as actor and people as focus, we can have a lot of energy. We have a lot of ideas, and although different groups are different, you can create different social cluster. But you get the social group to build a different social cluster, which link together into a platform of community. And then housing is a part of this, but housing is not the only element, and we don't have people. So I'm just trying to bring it back. So in this way, we are building very many things at the same time. In many of the community in which we work this way, people build not only the physical setting, they make better environment, they make welfare system, they make social cluster, they make the community fund, the economic system totally by themselves, you know. So I just think that if we look in a broader scale at the city level, this could be quite important change for our global development direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think we all appreciate the fact that you are not just talking the change but doing it. So all of our admiration to you for that. David, being conscious that you are standing between people and their lunch, let me ask you to particularly, comment on this issue that keeps coming back. Are we romanticising communities here? What do we want to say about productivity? Anything else you'd like to say in the way of summing up to this? I'm not sure it's possible to sum up this discussion. I'm asking you to do it rather than offering to do it myself. But anything else you'd like to say? Thank you.
I suppose a couple of things. Monitoring how the Sustainable Development Goal drafts change is kind of onerous, and there's big negotiations going on to change a word here or to take out a word there, and networks who've been supporting the city goal have had to defend it because there's people that said we don't need the city goal, it's dealt with in infrastructure. And to some extent, productive gets shoved into the infrastructure goal, leaving the city talking more about resilience and equitable and inclusive. But I can't quite fathom out how these decisions are made, or what to drop and what to add. On what I can talk about more is whether the poorest groups are participating. The first federation of savings groups was formed by the pavement dwellers in Baikala in Mumbai, and you don't get much poorer than that. And the women's savers and the managers of the savers from Baikala have travelled all around the world. They still live on the pavement, and yet they've been to 10 or 12 different countries, helping slum dwellers, shack dwellers in other countries to learn how to save, because saving is what is the glue that holds them together. And in any city, savings groups are very, very district-based. It's the people almost within walking distance of you that form together and form a savings group. And as you develop your savings group, you learn of your sister savings group next door, and then the savings group across the city who've developed, some new toilet methodology you want to see. And look, it isn't perfect, but it does incorporate the poorest groups. It tries very hard to incorporate Hindu and Muslim, for instance, in India, in the same savings groups. And the focus on all the federations is we've got to have solutions that work for the poorest. That's limited in some ways. There's many federation members that have the income to follow alternative routes, but those alternative routes are for lower middle class or middle class. 20 years, well, Shumsuk's got 35 years working with these troops. I've got 25 years visiting them. You are stunned by their attempt to be inclusive, their organisation, their capacity, and how they flatter local politicians to bring them on board, not confront them. So that if a politician is particularly difficult, you invite him, and it usually is him, to open the community toilets that you've built, and slowly they identify people in the civil service and politicians that work for them, understand what they do, and they cultivate them and they bring them in. And you do have this kind of gentle, step-by-step very patient movement that is incredibly powerful at changing local values within local governments. So I'm just stunned by what they do, and I'm stunned by how little the development community think about them and their needs and their priorities and their capacities.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, the thing that I'm taking away from this morning particularly is this issue about putting people's own kind of needs and desires, complex and contradictory as they may be, at the heart of this process, which first of all means taking the trouble to go out and find out what it is that people want and just talk to them, which is, I think, something that we are pretty far behind generally in the in development policy and practice. And I'm really encouraged, as David said, to see all these kind of in some cases very small, in some cases very big, new models developing as we work through. We're going to hear a lot more about some specifics, have a lot more opportunity for this sort of the conversation, both about the grassroots level and about the broader national and global policy levels this afternoon. But just in closing, let me thank the panellists enormously, and also thank the very hard-working technical team that have made it possible for us to talk to the panellists. And invite you back next door to have lunch. We will be starting the next session in half an hour, so I hope that gives you an opportunity to talk to each other, but you're going to be spending the afternoon together as well. So, and Somsuk, thank you very, very much. It must be very late in the day for you, so thank you very, very much for sticking with us and for your contributions.